Welcome back, everyone, to Azimuth Podcast. Have you heard that the mayor of Chicago is proposing opening a government-owned grocery store? Is this a good idea? My name is Kimberly McNabb.
And I'm Barrett McNabb. Several big-name grocery stores, including Whole Foods and Walmart, have closed their stores in these underserved areas. 6 closed in the last year, citing profitability, challenges rising to shoplifting concerns, and the departure of these grocery stores exacerbates the problem of lack of access to fresh foods, especially in the south and west sides of the city.
Mayor Johnson stated all Chicagoans deserve to live near convenient, affordable, healthy grocery options, with supporters stating that these food access issues are closely tied to environmental and racial justice, with higher levels of food insecurity among Black and Latin residents. So making sure all people have access to healthy foods sounds noble, right?
Well, with Chicago being such a populous area to serve, one has to ask, why wouldn't these stores want to sell to so many people? It's not because grocery stores are money hungry or racist. It's because they have removed the company's ability to pay the location's bills. Critics state that the city is not doing a good job with the normal responsibilities of a government, like enforcing the law as it is.
I'm sure that Chicago's city-run grocery stores would have the same service, efficiency, and quality that is to be expected from the government of a city ranked 149th in its financial stability, ranked out of 149 cities.
Great.
80th in its public safety, 129th in the quality of its economy. Yeah, let's trust a government that is serving their community oh so well, with even more trust?
Well, proponents may argue to other government-run grocery stores in small towns in the United States. In Baldwin, Florida, in 2018, the only grocery store closed. Thus, residents would have to travel a minimum of 10 miles for groceries or go to the Dollar General. Many of the residents in the town of 1,600 people were senior citizens, no longer able to drive. So the mayor proposed opening its own grocery store, abandoned by mainstream supermarkets, uninterested in the low profit margins and rural communities at Baldwin's Market. All employees on the municipal payroll, from the butcher to the cashiers. Town maintenance workers pause from cutting grass to assist with deliveries, and residents approach the mayor to request specific milk types.
The mayor clarified, "We are not aiming for profitability. We are striving to cover our expenses and sustain the store. Any surplus funds will be reinvested in the town in some manner." While Lynch was unaware of other municipality-owned grocery stores when he introduced the idea to the town council, Baldwin was not alone. A similar experiment succeeded in St. Paul, Kansas, with a city-run grocery store since 2013. David Proctor, who oversees the Rural Grocery Initiative at Kansas State University, stated that another city-owned grocery store would open in Caney, Kansas in the spring, with at least one more town in the state contemplating a similar endeavor. Many small-town grocers are approaching retirement age, and dwindling populations make it challenging for communities to attract new residents without a nearby supermarket. Consequently, Proctor emphasized that food access becomes almost like a utility that you have to have for a town to exist. Proctor added, fundamentally, you have people who have spent their entire lives in these rural communities, and they want these communities to survive.
Sure.
And they recognize that without food access, survival of the city is very uncertain.
While a collectively owned government-operated venture like the Baldwin Market inherently aligns with socialist principles, Lynch, holding a nonpartisan position, doesn't view it, though, through that lens. To him, the town is merely fulfilling its duty by providing services to residents who otherwise would bear significant tax burdens. He remarked, "We extract water from the ground, pump it to your house, and charge you. So what distinguishes a grocery store?" So, Kimberly, what would the difference be like between examples in Florida and Kansas to a potential grocery store in Chicago?
Well, the two biggest differences that I see would be the level of crime in Chicago compared to that of these communities, and the overall shared desire to keep the local communities alive. The government has made it impossible in Chicago for a business to not just make a profit, but also pay its bills. Grocery stores don't operate on a big profit margin. And people tend to think that since there in general in America, so many grocery stores with so much food, that the profit margins on grocery stores must be good. Like restaurants, it's like 30%. So people want to open up restaurants. But the profit margins are actually really small, and these stores without much theft or damage, it's still only 1 to 3% at most. And we in America do not realize just how lucky we are.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you look at those two stores that the city had to do because of a need for residents that wanted the stores there and wanted to participate in the stores versus stores closing because they're being robbed and they're being shoplifted out of existence. To me, that means that the community doesn't really want the store there.
Yeah.
I mean, or else they would limit their the crime. They would community leaders would rally and say, look, though, this has got to stop. People would give tips into the police to arrest these gangs and organized shoplifters. I mean, it's just crazy. I mean, to talk about how lucky we are. So there is, in 1989, Boris Yeltsin, who replaced Gorbachev as the leader of the Soviet Union, was touring the NASA, the Johnson Space Center in Clear Lake, which is a municipality just to the southeast of Houston, Texas. And he said, "Hey, look, I want to do an impromptu stop," and so he stopped at a local grocer called Randall's. Again, this is in 1989, and was absolutely just floored. It was a 20-minute stop. He went in. It was unplanned, and he went into this grocery store, and he was just absolutely amazed at all of the produce that was available, all the fresh produce, all of the fresh fish that was available, and the meat. And apparently he was extremely fascinated with the Jell-O chocolate frozen pops inside the
fudge
frozen
pops?
Yeah, the fudge pops.
Those
Yeah.
are awesome.
And so he was just absolutely amazed. And the store gave him some samples of things. He got to try cheese, but he seriously thought and made the comment that the United States somehow staged this, and that they had taken all of the items from all of the surrounding grocery stores and put it just in this one store to kind of show off. And we all know here in the United States that all of our grocery stores have a varied selection and often have fresh produce and things like that. And so it was absolutely amazing to him. He couldn't believe it. He thought somehow the CIA had known that he was going to stop in a grocery store and pre-packed the store. And obviously, that's not true, but still, it just goes to show you that even we had stuff that the Politburo doesn't have, that the premier of the Soviet Union at the time didn't have, that all of the wealthy people didn't have, and for us, it is available right here, right now, and especially with current just-in-time logistics, you're having food supplies from all over the world. You're getting strawberries year-round versus particular season, and so it just goes to show that it's just amazing, and I think sometimes we take it for granted.
Absolutely. We're very blessed. So now these people in Chicago who are robbing all these stores, my question is if they want to open up the government-owned grocery store, something to think about is if people have such disregard for businesses that they already feel free to steal from, do you really think their desire to pay for groceries is going to exist when the government is paying for it?
Yeah, it almost seems though that as a potential shoplifter goes in and says, wait, this one's This one's Chicago owned. No, I'm gonna pass. I'm not gonna steal anything from this because it's government owned versus private owned.
Absolutely. And in a city that is big as Chicago, it makes sense to not be worried about the city no longer existing, whereas in these small towns, it is easy to see that their city could no longer exist.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. Now, while there's examples of government-owned grocery stores being successful, there are plenty of examples of government-owned stores not being a great service to the local populace.
Yeah, when I first heard of this government-owned grocery store idea, my knee-jerk reaction was, isn't that something they do in Russia or Venezuela?
Well, here we have a picture from NPR taken at a government-owned grocery store in Venezuela. Empty shelves like these are common in Caracas, and people are limited what they can buy, and often they have designated days. And they must get fingerprinted in order to prove their identity. And, talk about strict voting laws. How about proving your identity in order to buy groceries?
That reminds me of the toilet paper shelves during the lockdowns.
I've read responses to the news on Instagram, and they include, so the government can push lab-grown meat. So it's easier for government to ration when the next plandemic comes. That was good. Mm-hmm. And won't get in without the mark of the beast.
Whew. And that last one is not in response to the Venezuela picture either. But I would say the winner of Instagram responses belongs to Nick Freitas, a member of the Virginia House of Delegates. If you don't follow him on Instagram, I highly suggest it. He's pretty hysterical. And his response was, who wouldn't want the grocery store experience with the efficiency of the DMV? With the customer service of the IRS.
That's great. While we do have examples of government-owned grocery stores being successful, crime ruins the ability of any aspect of a successful society to flourish.
And there we have it. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Please stay tuned for these messages in our next 2 segments. Hi, everyone. Thank you for listening. If you enjoy our show with all the stories we share, we would love your support.
And it's as easy as clicking that subscribe or follow button. This will ensure you never miss an episode and keeps us bringing you these important stories. Your support makes a huge difference. Thank you so much for being part of our podcast family.
Thanks, and keep tuning in. Welcome to Azimuth Podcasts. In the era of victim mentality, we are discussing raising children without them understanding the consequences of their actions. I am Kimberly McNabb.
And I'm Barrett McNabb. And let's talk about something that just happened in the news. 2 teens have recently been arrested and charged with murder among a number of other crimes in regards to filming them hitting bicyclists with their vehicle, including going, hey, go ahead and bump him, go ahead and hit him. And unfortunately, they did this to a number of people, and the last person they did it to was a retired police officer who died.
And they had stolen 4 vehicles. This is all in the same day. 4 vehicles, hit a 72-year-old person. Fortunately, their injuries were not life-threatening. But they're on film saying, get his...
Right.
I think this was at like 6 o'clock in the morning, really early in the morning.
Yeah, obviously these people, when they're hit, they're riding their bicycles. They're going with the flow of traffic, so they're not looking behind them. And who expects somebody to deliberately go ahead and with malice aforethought hit you? And I mean, it's just absolutely insane. Now, the 2 mothers have spoken out, and interestingly, the mothers have two different things to say. One mother said, "You can't believe everything that's in the media. The truth is going to come out." I don't know how.
Which is an odd thing to say. I don't see what we're missing.
Yeah, I mean, it's their own video recordings are filmed on their phones that were recovered, showing the crime.
Yeah, I just can't believe the brazenness to which they video record it. I mean, if you don't want to be charged with the crime, don't film yourself doing the crime.
Right.
And so obviously they don't care what happens to them. And the parents, I mean, how would you feel?
Well, I mean,
if that were our kids, I would just.
I have the same feeling that the second mother said, which took the opposite stance of the first mother, and said, I don't know why he did this. I don't know if God can forgive this. So she's recognizing that this is wrong. And a lot of this is going to, as they go to trial, one of the teens had just turned 18. The other is 16 going on 17. They're both being tried as adults.
Oh, good.
And so, we really have to look at depraved indifference is going to be a factor. One of the things that whenever you are looking at a crime, and by the way, I have a Bachelor of Science degree in criminal justice with a specialization on law enforcement. And so one of the things that's important to look at crime is called mens rea. And it is with the English translation of a Latin phrase of the guilty mind. And in this instance, when they said, go ahead and get him, go ahead and bump him. I mean,
pre-planned.
They're doing it on purpose. Yeah, they're doing it on purpose. They have a guilty mind. They know that there's a reasonable expectation that there is going to be injury that's going to occur as they're speeding in a vehicle and the person's riding a bicycle and they're being hit from behind, not able to turn away, not knowing what's going on. I mean, the last video you see is of the individual actually going across the hood of the car, and again, this goes to this depraved indifference. When one of the teenagers was arrested and charged, he said, I'm a juvenile offender. Go ahead and
it would just be a slap on the wrist.
Just be a slap on the wrist for me.
Disregard for any consequences and lack of concern for human life. And I've heard arguments on other outlets saying, oh, well, they'll probably argue, the lawyer will probably argue that especially the male brain isn't fully developed until age 25. Well, okay, so you want fifth graders to decide what gender they're going to be? They're far less developed, and that's a very life-altering decision. And we have 18-year-olds who are allowed to join the military, and we have 18-year-olds, 17, 18, 19-year-olds going off to college, picking out their major, so determining a course for their lives and signing on huge amounts of student loan debt. So clearly, their brain should be formed enough to make the decision and know what they're doing, taking a human life.
Yeah, and again, it just goes to that mentality that said, look, this is going to be a slap on the wrist. I'll be out of here in 30 days. And it really is just, it's just unimaginable that they wouldn't have remorse. I mean, none of the teens,
or at least care enough about their own life. Like, yeah. I want to ruin it by going to jail. One of my first thoughts is, this kid's mother didn't teach him consequences.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, to go joyriding through the night is
in a stolen vehicle.
A stolen vehicle. I'm sorry, but people like to picture an angel here and a devil here. Mine is my mother's going to come out of the woodwork and just slap me Medea style.
Right. Right.
And I think parents need to raise their kids more like that. I'd rather pay for therapy than for my child going to jail. It's
the same thing that back in April of this year, we had 3 young men that were taking landscaping small boulders and riding in the back of a pickup truck and tossing them at vehicles going the opposite direction. And it did result in a fatality. They threw one of these boulders. They were going 70 miles an hour. The 20-year-old female was going 70 miles an hour in the opposite direction. So when you combine that, that's 140 miles an hour. velocity, and they tossed this small boulder, and it went straight through the windshield and killed the woman. I mean, just absolutely killed the woman. And the big thing that they said is we have to go back and see that, and they took a photograph of the dead woman as a memento. Because they thought that would be a good trophy to have. And, this is just absolutely, again, I've said the phrase already, but just depraved indifference. I mean, where are the morals that a young adult...
It's a parent's job.
It's the parent's job. Yeah, absolutely.
And them. And, teach them right from wrong and consequences.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I've always said, and I know I've said this, as a parent because we have two small children, the greatest thing that I think I can teach our son and our daughter is to be kind. Just to be kind, to have a good moral compass, and to enter this world and be kind. Now that doesn't mean to be naive. I don't mean to be naive,
not.
but the world needs a little bit of kindness. Yeah, exactly. But the world needs a little bit of kindness, and I just cannot imagine that how funny this was to these three men.
I don't understand what the point was. Like, what do you have to gain from this? And these things are another example why, and I've said this for years, one of the most destructive forces in this world is bored young men. You get a bunch of bored teenage boys, they're going to get into trouble, and that's, they have too much energy and no guidance. They need to be kept busy, and people in general need to be kept busier, and that's one reason why I get so scared watching the border crisis, because, and we've said in our immigration video that most of these people, when you see the footage, is mostly young fighting age men, young men. I'm like,
single men by themselves.
I don't see women in sight. I don't see children in sight. These are not poor, desperate families. And they're not bringing any skills. They don't have jobs lined up. So what are they going to be doing? They're going to be hanging out, and they're going to get into trouble. They're going to rob people. And what happens when you have a bunch of young, vibrant, virile men hanging around each other? They're probably going to want a woman. So I would be very afraid to come across these individuals as a woman.
Right. That makes sense.
That scares me. So yeah, bored men need to be kept busy and productive.
Well, I mean, just again going back to these fatalities that we have. To your point, Kimberly, these kids were obviously bored. They weren't playing video games; they were playing real life, and so with deadly consequences. And
their parents should have gotten them jobs.
Should have gotten them jobs, but the big thing is the remorse, the lack of remorse is truly saddened. I'm very sad about that, because obviously their moral compass is destroyed, and that's not to say that they're not going to find God in prison, but still, I mean, it's what important now into the families.
Yeah, and to be so callous at 16 years old, I just can't imagine. I mean, to deliberately do all of that at such a young age, I don't know if they're going to be able to be rehabilitated, or I hate to say anything's impossible, but the chances are very slim. So they're going to be tried as adults, thank goodness. But do you think they would get the death penalty?
Well, so it's interesting to say that because Nevada does have the death penalty. The 18-year-old, it's definitely on the table. the Supreme Court has ruled that juveniles, so one of them is 16, juveniles are not eligible for the death penalty, and to also include life without the possibility of parole, that has been ruled against by the Supreme Court as well. So there is an opportunity for that individual to get out. And so, I mean, the thing on punishment is it needs to be swift, certain, and severe. And so it needs to happen quickly. We can't have years and years and years go by because you lose the ability to have that punishment understand the crime and fit with the crime. It needs to be certain. There has to be precedent that, look, this is, going to happen to you, which is why it's so dangerous that a lot of the liberal prosecutors across some of the major metropolitan areas in the United States are choosing not to prosecute offenses. So that eliminates that certainty of that you will be punished. And then severe. It needs to be extremely severe so that it deters other people. There are studies that show that the death penalty does not deter crime, but I know with a firm statistic that every single person that has been executed for capital crimes, every single one of them, none of them have ever committed another crime again. And that
kind of hard.
That's one of those. Yeah, that's one of those 100% certainty that if you have the death penalty, you never commit another crime again, and that's
and the victims can rest knowing that the person's never getting out of jail.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I get really tired of hearing people go, "Oh, that's cruel." I am afraid that they will not be punished harshly because we live under this guise of, "Oh, we don't want to be cruel," or one of them, was removed from his home for like 8 years, but the thing people need to think about is when crime is not punished harshly, you're not just not taking away the lesson to be learned from the individual who committed the crime. You're also removing the lessons from society that when you do bad things happen to you. And that's how I word it with our kids. So really robbing society of that lesson.
Yeah, and and again, the criminal justice funnel. Police officers are obviously the very first line of that the criminal justice funnel, and police officers have a really powerful position in the fact that they can they have discretion. They have discretion on whether or not they're going to detain somebody. They have discretion on whether they're going to arrest somebody. But once that happens, and they're doing it because of the reasonable suspicion or probable cause, these are these of proof that they give over to the prosecutor's office, and the prosecutors obviously have a prosecutorial discretion on whether they're going to prosecute or not. And that is, unfortunately, we are losing that lesson because people are not prosecuting. And there's the theory of broken windows. Mm-hmm. And broken windows is, if you have a building that people are throwing rocks at and are breaking the windows, and the building is not well kept, and it's getting graffiti on it, it starts to feed on itself, and then
people say, oh, they don't have enough respect to maintain, the windows.
Right.
Then what do they care about this? What do they care about that? I mean, as well, it's like seeing a couple pieces of trash on the ground. Well, okay, clearly it's okay to do that.
Right.
And
it's
so
just a precursor.
It's just dirty.
Yeah, it just ramps up, and it's a precursor, and so that's one of the things that's important. Now, community-based policing is also important, and that's getting the police officers on the ground and interacting with the populace. But again, the level of respect for our law enforcement, is I think hindering, and it's because of a few bad apples. We've had numerous stories of bad apples in law enforcement that are doing things, but that is not everybody. That's not everybody.
People need to keep in mind that there are bad apples in every profession. I
Sure.
mean, come on, how many times have you been to a grocery store and experienced bad service? But how many times have you been where you experienced okay or really good service?
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Well, please stay tuned after these messages, and Azimuth Podcast will continue.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for listening. If you enjoy our show with all the stories we share, we would love your support.
And it's as easy as clicking that subscribe or follow button. This will ensure you never miss an episode and keeps us bringing you these important stories. Your support makes a huge difference. Thank you so much for being part of our podcast family.
Thanks, and keep tuning in. Welcome back to Azimuth Podcast. We are continuing our coverage of presidential candidates. Today, we're discussing Christie's candidacy. I am Kimberly McNabb.
And I'm Barrett McNabb. Let's watch Chris Christie's campaign video on his website. Oh, wait. There isn't one. There is a 2-hour town hall, but we're not going to go ahead and play that. But I would strongly suggest that Governor Christie's campaign create a 2-minute, 3-minute long video that talks about all of the things that you want to do as President of the United States, the status of our country, as well as having some inspirational music and inspirational thoughts. But there is none of that on his website. So I would strongly suggest that his campaign team gets after it and starts to spruce up his campaign website because he's got a lot of great things to say. It just needs to be packaged,
right,
so that people can get to it.
I'm sure we could do a video comment, giving some do's and don'ts of these campaign videos. That
We've seen some great ones. Yeah,
we've seen some good ones, and still some tweaks that could be made.
Right, absolutely. So anyway, he's the former governor of New Jersey. Chris Christie was appointed to the United States Attorney for the District of New Jersey by President George W. Bush in 2001. And during his tenure from 2002 to 2008, he focused on combating public corruption, achieving convictions or guilty pleas from 130 public officials. That's insane. Mm-hmm. Democrats and Republicans alike. He went on to serve as the governor of New Jersey from 2010 to 2018, and during his tenure, he emphasized fiscal responsibility by not raising taxes and implementing property tax limits.
Oh. However, it is important to note that New Jersey's credit rating was downgraded multiple times during his time as governor, which is often a point of contention.
Yeah, Christie support tax incentives for businesses, school vouchers, charter schools, and changes to teacher tenure rules. He aimed at reducing the size of New Jersey's Department of Environmental Protection and promoting manufacturing and alternative energy.
Chris Christie became the second 2024 Republican presidential hopeful to visit Ukraine, meeting President Volodymyr Zelensky in Kyiv, touring ravaged villages and expressing strong support for continued U.S. assistance to Ukraine. He emphasized the need to prevent further suffering and advocated for bipartisan support for Ukraine.
But it's worth mentioning that the GOP presidential field is divided over the future of U.S. involvement in the Ukraine conflict. Christie has criticized President Joe Biden's approach and emphasized the need for Ukraine to receive the means to secure its freedom. Other candidates like Nikki Haley, Mike Pence, and Ron DeSantis have differing views on the matter.
Christie's visit to Ukraine underscores the importance of foreign policy and international relations for potential presidential candidates. It is a complex issue that requires a comprehensive approach.
Now, one of his positions is on abortion. Christie is pro-life, and he supported restrictions on abortions at the state level. However, he does make exceptions in the cases of rape, incest, or when the mother's life is in danger. However, he would not support a federal ban and would leave the issue to the states.
Another significant issue for Christie is entitlement reform. He has advocated for raising the retirement age to address the sustainability of entitlement programs. And when it comes to immigration, Christie is not in favor of open borders. He emphasizes the importance of border security and has a nuanced stance on in-state tuition for undocumented immigrants.
Now let's talk about Christie's strengths and weaknesses as a potential presidential candidate. Christie certainly has some notable strengths. He's a skilled debater. He's known for direct, no-nonsense communication style. His legal and government experience, including his time as a federal prosecutor and two-term governor, are assets.
Christie's leadership during Hurricane Sandy earned him widespread praise and a high job approval rating. He's proven that he can win elections in a blue state, expanding the Republican base. Yet, on the other hand, there are weaknesses to consider. Christie's relationship with former President Donald Trump has been rocky, to say the least, and he is often viewed as an anti-Trump figure by some in the Republican Party. Republicans blame Chris Christie for recommending Christopher Wray to President Trump to be head of the FBI.
Well, his involvement in temporary closing of the George Washington Bridge during his governorship, known as Bridgegate, was a significant embarrassment and could be a liability.
And there we have it. As the 2024 presidential race continues to take shape, it will be interesting to see how Christie navigates the political terrain.
Yeah, and Governor Christie, make sure you have your staff update your website with some verbiage as well as some inspirational videos. I think that'll help you go a long way. But thank you for joining us on this episode of Azimuth Podcast. Until then, stay informed and engaged in the political process, and we'll be with you the whole way.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for listening. If you enjoy our show with all the stories we share, we would love your support.
And it's as easy as clicking that subscribe or follow button. This will ensure you never miss an episode and keeps us bringing you these important stories. Your support makes a huge difference. Thank you so much for being part of our podcast family.
Thanks, and keep tuning in.